The coffee had gone cold hours ago, but Dr. Hyunwoo Kim didn't notice. His eyes were fixed on the screen showing wave patterns that shouldn't exist. For 3 days, he had been staring at the same signal buried deep in the cosmic background noise. It was like finding a whisper in a thunderstorm. "Still here, Hyunwoo?" Sojin Park walked into the communications lab carrying 2 fresh cups of coffee. She was the best signal analyst at the Seoul Deep Space Array, and she looked as tired as he felt. "Look at this," Hyunwoo said, pointing at his screen. "This signal came from outside our galaxy. But that's not the strange part." Sojin sat down next to him and studied the display. The signal looked like nothing she had ever seen. It moved through frequencies and patterns that seemed almost alive. "What's the strange part?" "It's encrypted, but not with any math we know, and it's broadcasting on quantum frequencies. We shouldn't be able to detect it with our equipment." Sojin frowned. Human technology was still basic compared to what they imagined other civilizations might have. Earth had only just figured out how to build ships that could travel faster than light. "Are you sure it's artificial?" "Positive, look at these patterns." Hyunwoo pulled up another screen. "They repeat every 47.3 seconds. Nature doesn't do that. Someone made this signal. They worked through the night, trying to decode the message." Hyunwoo was an expert in languages, but this wasn't like any human language. It was more like music made of mathematics. Sojin focused on the technical side, analyzing how the signal was structured. As the sun rose over Seoul, they finally had their first breakthrough. "It's a distress call," Sojin said, her voice barely a whisper. "These mathematical patterns, their coordinates, and a countdown." Hyunwoo felt his heart race. "Countdown to what?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it happens in 18 days. They called their supervisor, Dr. Yoon-Young Lee, who arrived within an hour. She was the head of the xenobiology department and one of the smartest people Hyunwoo knew. When they showed her their discovery, her face went pale. "This is first contact," she said quietly. "We need to inform the Space Command immediately." Within 6 hours, the Seoul Array was crawling with military personnel. Captain Taehyun Cho arrived from the orbital station with a team of specialists. He was younger than Hyunwoo had expected for such an important position, but his reputation preceded him. Taehyun was known for making impossible decisions under pressure. "Show me everything," Taehyun said. They gathered in the main briefing room. Lieutenant Dongmin Yoon, the captain's tactical officer, took notes while Hyunwoo explained their discovery. Chief Engineer Ji-hoon Seo asked technical questions that Sojin answered with growing excitement. "The signal is incredibly advanced," Sojin explained. "It's broadcasting through dimensions we barely understand. The math involved is at least a century ahead of our best theories." "But you decoded it?" Taehyun asked. "Only the basic parts," Hyunwoo admitted. "It's like learning a few words of a foreign language. We know it's a distress call, we have coordinates, and we know something bad is happening. But the details..." He shrugged helplessly. Dr. Eun-young stood up. "There's something else. We've been checking our archives. This isn't the first signal like this." The room fell silent. "Over the past 10 years, we've detected 17 similar signals, all from different star systems, all with the same desperate tone." She paused. "All of those systems have gone silent." Captain Taehyun studied the star charts on the wall. "How far is this new signal coming from?" "Kepler 442 system," Sojin answered. "About 1,200 light-years away." "That's a 40-day journey with our fastest ship," Ji-hoon calculated. "We only have 18 days before whatever the countdown is pointing to," Dongmin pointed out. Taehyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he turned to his team. "We're going." "Sir?" Dongmin looked surprised. "We don't know what we're flying into. That's exactly why we need to go. Someone out there is asking for help. Maybe they're asking other species with better technology than us. But what if we're the only ones who heard them?" Hyunwoo felt a chill run down his spine. "Captain, our technology shouldn't have been able to detect this signal at all. The fact that we did, it might not be a coincidence." "What do you mean?" I mean, maybe there's a reason we're the ones who found it. The next few days were a whirlwind of preparation. The UES Determination was Earth's newest and largest exploration ship. It carried a crew of 200 and was equipped with the best technology humanity had developed. But compared to whoever sent the signal, they were bringing stone tools to a laser fight. Hyun-woo and So-jin worked around the clock to decode more of the message. They discovered words that roughly translated to concepts like consuming, darkness, and silence. Most disturbing was a phrase that appeared over and over. They eat thoughts. Dr. Yoon-young packed her laboratory with every piece of biological analysis equipment she could fit. If they were going to meet aliens, she wanted to be ready. She also brought samples of Earth life, plants, bacteria, even some small animals. It was humanity's first diplomatic mission to another species. Ji-hoon focused on the ship's systems. The determination was powerful, but it was also untested on such a long journey. He ran diagnostics on every system twice, then ran them again. They would be alone in deep space with no hope of rescue if something went wrong. Lieutenant Dong-min prepared for the worst-case scenario. The ship carried weapons designed for fighting pirates and hostile governments, not alien threats. He didn't know if they would be enough, but they were all humanity had. On the day of departure, Hyun-woo stood on the observation deck watching Earth grow smaller. He thought about the signal that had started everything. Somewhere in the darkness between stars, someone was crying for help. They had been crying for help for years while star system after star system fell silent. Having second thoughts, Captain Taehyun joined him at the window. Every few minutes, Hyun-woo admitted, we're flying blind into something that has apparently destroyed 17 civilizations. Our weapons are primitive, our technology is basic, and we have no idea what we're up against. So why are we doing it? Hyun-woo thought about that. Why were they risking everything for strangers they had never met? Because they called for help and we heard them. Maybe that makes us responsible. Taehyun nodded. The signal wasn't meant for us. With our level of technology, we should never have detected it, but we did. Maybe that means something. The determination jumped to faster than light speed, carrying 200 humans toward their first contact with alien life. In the communications array, So-jin continued monitoring the signal. It was getting stronger as they approached, and she was beginning to decode more complex parts of the message. What she found kept her awake at night. The signal wasn't just a distress call. It was a warning. Something was coming to Earth, following the signals back to their source. The same something that had already consumed 17 other worlds. Earth had maybe 6 months before it arrived. The mission to Kepler 442 wasn't just about saving aliens anymore. It was about saving humanity too. As the ship traveled through the dark void between stars, none of the crew knew they were about to face something that had never been defeated. Something that fed on the thoughts and dreams of entire civilizations. Something that considered order and intelligence to be diseases that needed to be cured. They were going to meet the silence, and it was very hungry. The determination dropped out of faster-than-light speed at the edge of the Kepler 442 system, and everyone on the bridge fell silent. Through the main view screen, they could see 3 dead worlds hanging in space like broken toys. Where there should have been blue oceans and white clouds, there were only gray, lifeless rocks. "Sensor report," Captain Taehyun ordered, his voice steady despite what they were all seeing. Lieutenant Dong-min worked at his station, his face growing pale. "Sir, the atmospheric readings are impossible. All 3 planets have had their atmospheres completely stripped away. Not destroyed, stripped, like something peeled them off." Dr. Yoon-young leaned over her biological scanners. "I'm not detecting any life signs from the first 3 planets, but the 4th planet..." She paused, checking her readings twice. "Captain, the 4th planet is covered in life. Massive biosignatures everywhere." "The source of our signal?" Hyun-woo asked from his communication station. "Confirmed. The distress call is coming from the 4th planet." But as they got closer, something felt wrong. The space around them seemed darker than it should be. Stars that should have been visible were dim or missing entirely. It was like looking through dirty water. Chief engineered a bridge. Ji-hoon's voice came through the communication system. We're getting some very strange readings down here. Our instruments are showing areas of space where matter just isn't behaving normally. So Jin was monitoring all communication frequencies when she suddenly straightened. Captain, I'm picking up another signal, not the distress call. This is different. Put it on speakers. The bridge filled with a sound unlike anything human ears had ever heard. It was part music, part language, and part pure emotion. Even through the translation computers, they could feel the desperation in it. It's a ship, Sojin reported. Small, maybe 50 kilometers away. They're trying to communicate with us. Tae-hyun made his decision quickly. Hail them, standard, first contact protocols. What appeared on their screen made everyone gasp. The alien was beautiful in a way that hurt to look at. Its body seemed to be made of living crystal, shifting between blue and silver as it moved. When it spoke, its voice was like wind chimes in a storm. I am Veltar of the Thylos Empire, the alien said through their translation system. How are you here? How did you survive passage through the silence? I am Captain Tae-hyun Cho of Earth. We received your distress signal and came to help. The alien's crystalline form flickered with what might have been surprise. Earth? Your species is not in our database. Your technology appears, primitive. How did you detect our quantum dimensional broadcast? Before Tae-hyun could answer, Veltar's image was suddenly filled with panic. No, you must leave immediately. It knows you are here now. It will follow. You back to your world. The ship shuddered. Outside the windows, space itself seemed to ripple like water. Dark tendrils of something that wasn't quite matter began reaching toward the determination. What is that? Dongmin shouted, his weapon systems coming online automatically. The silence, Veltar said, and even through the translator, they could hear the terror in its voice. It consumes civilizations. It has already taken 47 species. My people fought it for months with technology far beyond yours. We failed. Commander Woo Jin Han led the boarding party to the alien ship. What they found there broke their hearts. The Thylos ship was beautiful and advanced beyond human imagination, but it was also dying. The 50 aliens aboard were the last survivors of their entire civilization. Dr. Yoon-young examined the Thylos with wonder and growing horror. They were incredibly advanced, with brains that could process information in ways humans couldn't even understand. But something was wrong with them. Their thoughts seemed empty. It feeds on consciousness, Veltar explained to the gathered humans. The silence doesn't just destroy bodies. It eats thoughts, dreams, memories. It leaves the body alive, but takes away everything that makes you who you are. Hyunwoo studied the Thylos language and technology. Your people must have been incredibly intelligent. Your math is centuries ahead of ours. We were. We achieved perfect unity of thought across our entire species. We eliminated chaos and disorder from our civilization. We believed this made us strong. Veltar's crystalline body dimmed. We were wrong. The order we created made us visible to it, like a bright light in the darkness. Ji-hoon examined the Thylos weapon systems. Even their most basic tools were more advanced than humanity's. Best technology, but all of them bore the marks of desperate, failed battles. You fought this thing with all of this technology and lost? The silence exists partially outside normal space and time. Physical weapons cannot harm it. Energy weapons pass through. We tried everything. Veltar looked at the humans with what might have been pity. If we could not stop it, how can you hope to succeed? The question hung in the air like a curse. How could 200 humans with primitive technology defeat something that had conquered 47 advanced civilizations? Dr. Yoon-young was running medical scans on the Thylos refugees when she made a disturbing discovery. Captain, you need to see this. The Thylos aren't just injured. They're being actively consumed. Whatever the silence is, it's still feeding on them even at this distance. But some of us resist better than others, added a young Thylos named Zil-Neth. Unlike the adults, this one's crystalline form still held some brightness. The younglings, the ones whose thoughts are not yet fully ordered. We last longer. So Jin made the connection first. Captain, what if the silence targets organized thought? What if chaos and disorder actually protect against it? Taehyun felt a cold realization settling over him. You're saying it goes after civilizations that think in organized ways? The more advanced and unified a species becomes, the more attractive it is to the silence, Veltar confirmed. This is why it consumed the greatest civilizations first. The Zephyrians with their hive minds lasted only days. The crystalline collective, who shared all thoughts across their species, fell in hours. But humans, Hyunwoo started to understand. Human thoughts are chaotic. We don't think in unison. We argue with ourselves and each other constantly. Your species appears to lack the ordered consciousness that attracts the silence, Veltar said. But this will not save you. It has learned of your existence now. It will adapt. The ship shook again as dark tendrils of the silence pressed against their shields. Through the viewports they could see it more clearly now. It wasn't exactly alive, but it wasn't dead either. It moved like smoke with purpose, like shadow with intelligence. Captain, Dongmin reported, our weapons are having no effect. The energy beams are passing right through it. Taehyun made a decision that would have seemed insane to anyone who wasn't desperate. We're not running. Sir? Several voices spoke. At once. Someone called for help. We came. We're not leaving without at least trying to help. Veltar's crystalline form flickered with something that might have been admiration. Your species is either very brave or very foolish. Usually both, Taehyun replied. Commander Han, begin evacuation of the Thylos ship. All refugees aboard the Determination. Captain, Dr. Yun-Young said quietly, if the silence follows us, back to Earth, then Earth needs to know what's coming. We can run and die slowly, or we can stand and maybe learn something useful. He looked around the bridge at his crew. Besides, we still don't know why we were able to detect their signal when no one else could. That has to mean something. As the evacuation began, Hyunwoo continued studying the Thylos language and history. What he found made his blood run cold. The distress signal they had received wasn't sent by the Thylos. They had sent out many signals, but all in their own quantum dimensional frequencies. The signal that Earth had detected was sent by the silence itself. It was a lure, designed to draw other civilizations to feed upon. 47 species had answered that call, and 47 species had been consumed. Humanity had answered by accident, and that accident might be the only reason they were still alive. But for how much longer? Outside the ship, the silence pulsed with something that might have been hunger and began to follow them home. Dr. Yun-Young worked carefully in the medical bay, examining the Thylos refugees. Their bodies were unlike anything she had studied before, living crystal that could change shape and color based on their thoughts. But what fascinated and terrified her was how the silence was affecting them. It's not like any disease or parasite I've ever seen, she explained to Captain Taehyun. The silence doesn't attack the body. It attacks consciousness itself. Look at these brain scans. She showed him readings from Veltar's crystalline neural structure. See these dark areas? Those are thoughts that have been consumed. Memories, experiences, pieces of personality, all gone. The body stays alive, but the mind becomes empty. How does it do that? Taehyun asked. Near as I can tell, it feeds on organized thought patterns. The Thylos achieve something we humans never have. Perfect mental harmony. Their entire civilization thought in sync, like a giant brain. To the silence, they were like a beacon in the darkness. In his communication station, Hyunwoo was making similar discoveries. The more he studied Thylos language and culture, the more he understood how different they were from humans. Captain, come look at this. Hyunwoo had been analyzing Thylos literature and history. Their entire society was based on unity of thought. They eliminated disagreement, conflict, even creative chaos. Everyone thought the same way about everything. Sounds peaceful, Taehyun said. Maybe. But it also made them incredibly visible to the silence. Look at these records from other species it consumed. The Zephyrians shared a hive mind. The crystalline collective had no individual thoughts at all. The pattern is clear. The more organized and unified a species' consciousness, the faster it falls. So, Jin looked up from her analysis station. That explains why we could detect their signal. Human consciousness is the opposite of organized. We're chaos incarnate. To prove her point, she had been monitoring the thought patterns of the human crew using modified Thylos equipment. Look at this, she said, showing them a display of overlapping brainwaves. Thylos thoughts look like perfect sine waves, all in harmony. Human thoughts look like, well, like a mess. The display showed 200 different brain patterns, no two alike. Some crew members were thinking about home, others about the mission. Engineer Kim was solving a technical problem while simultaneously humming an old song and worrying about his daughter's school grades. Communications Officer Park was translating alien languages while mentally composing a letter to her mother and planning what to have for dinner. We're not just chaotic, Sojin continued. We're individually chaotic. Every human brain works differently. We argue with ourselves, change our minds, think about multiple things at once. To something that feeds on organized consciousness, we must be like looking at television static. This gave Dr. Subin Kang an idea. As the ship's psychologist, she understood human nature better than anyone. What if that's our advantage? What if the reason we survived this long is because we're too disorganized for the silence to properly target? You think our messiness protects us? Taehyun asked. I think our messiness is evolution's gift to us. Every other species we've learned about achieved some form of mental unity. They saw it as advancement. But maybe chaos isn't a flaw to be fixed. Maybe it's a feature. To test this theory, Subin began studying the Thylos refugees more closely. Most of them were adults with highly organized thought patterns, and they were being consumed quickly. But young Zilneth was different. The young one's thoughts are more chaotic, Subin observed. Not as organized as the adults. And look, the consumption rate is much slower. What does that mean? Veltar asked when they explained their findings. It means the more organized your thinking becomes, the more attractive you are to the silence, Dr. Yoon Young explained. Your people achieved perfect mental harmony, which made you perfect prey. Veltar's crystalline form flickered with distress. You are saying our greatest achievement led to our destruction? We're saying that maybe perfect order isn't perfect, Captain Taehyun replied. Maybe the universe needs a little chaos to stay alive. Lieutenant Dongmin had been quiet during this discussion, but now he spoke up. With respect, sir, this is all very interesting, but we still have a problem. The silence is following us back to Earth. Even if our chaotic thoughts make us harder to target, it will eventually adapt. Chief Engineer Ji-hoon nodded grimly. And our weapons still can't touch it. I've been working with Thylos technology trying to upgrade our systems, but even their most advanced weapons barely scratched this thing. So what do we do? So Jin asked. Captain Taehyun was quiet for a long moment, thinking. Around him, his crew waited for orders. The Thylos refugees looked on with hope and desperation. Outside the ship, the silence continued its pursuit, patient and unstoppable. We're going to do something that's never been tried before, Taehyun finally said. We're going to fight it, sir, Dongmin said carefully. 47 civilizations tried to fight it. They all lost. Because they all fought it the same way, with order, with unity, with organized resistance. What if we try fighting it with chaos? Dr. Subin's eyes lit up. You mean use our disorganized thinking as a weapon? I mean we stop trying to be like every other species and start being human. Humans don't fight fair. We don't follow rules. We improvise, we adapt, we do things that don't make sense. Hyunwoo was getting excited. The signal we detected wasn't meant for us, but we detected it anyway. Our technology shouldn't work on Thylos equipment, but we're making it work. Maybe being primitive and chaotic is exactly what we need. But how do we weaponize chaos? Ji-hoon asked practically. Subin had an idea. What if we don't fight the silence directly? What if we teach it to be chaotic? Everyone stared at her. Think about it, she continued. The silence consumes organized consciousness. But what happens if we feed it disorganized consciousness instead? What if we could make it think chaotically? You want to give it human thoughts? Dr. Young asked, horrified. Not give, share. Force it to experience what chaos feels like. It spent eons feeding on perfect order. What would happen if it suddenly had to process the kind of messy, contradictory thoughts that humans have every day? Veltar was listening to this conversation with growing amazement. Your species proposes to fight a cosmic horror with confusion? We propose to fight it with humanity, Taehyun corrected, with all the messy, illogical, beautiful chaos that makes us who we are. It's completely insane, Dongmin said. Good, Taehyun replied. Insane is what humans do best. They began planning immediately. Ji-hoon worked to modify their communication systems, trying to broadcast human thought patterns directly. Sojin analyzed the silence's structure, looking for ways to force it to receive chaotic input. Dr. Yoon studied the interaction between human and Thylos consciousness, trying to understand how they could bridge the gap. Young Zilneth watched. The humans work with fascination. Your thoughts are so random, the young Thylos said. How do you accomplish anything? Very slowly and with lots of mistakes, Hyunwoo answered honestly. But we get there eventually. We make progress by arguing with each other, Sojin added. Someone has an idea, someone else says it's stupid, we fight about it, and eventually we find something better. Among my people, such discord would be seen as madness, Veltar observed. Among humans, it's Tuesday, Captain Taehyun said with a grim smile. And maybe that's exactly what we need to save everyone. As they worked, the silence continued to follow them through space, patient and hungry. It had consumed 47 civilizations by understanding how they thought and feeding on their organized consciousness. But it had never encountered anything like humans before. It was about to learn that sometimes the best weapon against perfect order is perfect chaos, and nobody did chaos quite like humanity. The real battle was just beginning. The determination descended toward the infected world like a moth flying into a black flame. Around them, space itself looked wrong. Stars disappeared, light bent in impossible ways, and reality seemed to ripple like water disturbed by an unseen hand. Sensor readings are going crazy, Sojin reported from her station. It's like the silence is warping the laws of physics just by existing. Captain Taehyun gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered through another wave of distorted spacetime. How close can we get to the surface? Close enough, Lieutenant Dongmin answered. But sir, what we're seeing down there? He paused, trying to find words for something beyond human understanding. On the main screen, the fourth planet revealed itself. What had once been a world of crystal cities and floating gardens was now covered in organic structures that pulsed like a diseased heart. Dark veins spread across continents, and in some places, the planet's surface itself seemed to breathe. That's not the original planet, Dr. Yoon said, studying her biological scanners. The silence has rebuilt it. Every single structure down there is alive and connected to a central nervous system. The Thylos survivors, Veltar said weakly from the medical bay where the refugees were being treated. Some of my people are still alive down there, hidden in the deep shelters beneath the old cities, but they will not last much longer. Taehyun made his decision quickly. We're going down. Rescue mission, full deployment. Sir, Commander Woo Jin-han spoke up. The atmospheric readings showed toxic levels of everything. Nothing should be able to survive down there. The Thylos built their shelters to last. If there are survivors, we're getting them out. Taehyun turned to his crew. This is volunteer only. Anyone who wants to stay with the ship, no questions asked. Nobody moved to leave. Chief Engineer, Ji-hoon had been working around the clock to modify their equipment. I've managed to adapt some Thylos shield technology to our suits. It should protect us from the worst of what's down there. Should being the important word. Dr. Subin checked her psychological monitoring equipment. I'll be tracking everyone's mental state during the mission. If the silence starts affecting our thoughts, I'll know immediately. The landing party consisted of 20 volunteers led by Commander Wu Jin. They wore modified environmental suits that hummed with alien technology. Each carried weapons that combined human engineering with Thylos quantum physics. The result was unstable and dangerous, but it was their only hope of fighting something that existed partially outside normal reality. The surface of the planet was a nightmare. The air itself seemed thick with malevolent intelligence. Structures that might once have been buildings now grew like tumors from the ground, their surfaces covered in something that looked like veins but pulsed with dark energy. Instead of blood, stay close, Wu Jin ordered through the communication system, and keep your thoughts focused on the mission. Don't let your minds wander. This proved harder than expected. The silence was everywhere around them, pressing against their consciousness, like fog against glass. It was trying to read their thoughts to understand what they were, but human minds proved frustratingly difficult to penetrate. Engineer Park was thinking about 17 different things at once, while composing a mental shopping list and humming a song his grandmother used to sing. Medical Officer Lee was analyzing the alien biology around them, while simultaneously worrying about her cat back on Earth and trying to remember if she had turned off her coffee maker. The chaotic, multi-layered nature of human consciousness seemed to confuse the silence. It's like it doesn't know how to process us, Subin observed, monitoring their brain patterns remotely. Every time it tries to latch onto one thought, we've already moved on to 5 others. They found the first Thylos shelter 3 kilometers underground, accessible through what had once been a transit tunnel. The crystalline door was still sealed, powered by technology that had kept it secure for months while the world above was consumed. Inside, they found 12 Thylos survivors huddled in the dark. Unlike Veltar and the others on the ship, these refugees looked almost transparent, as if they were fading away. Who are you?" asked their leader, an elderly Thylos named Mordin, who had once been their civilization's chief scientist. "We're humans," Wu Jin said simply. "We came to help." "Humans?" Mordin's crystalline form flickered with confusion. "That designation is not in our databases. How did you penetrate the Silence's defenses?" "We didn't," Wu Jin admitted. "We just got lucky. Our thoughts are too messy for it to understand." As they helped the survivors toward the surface, Mordin shared what his people had learned about their enemy. "The Silence is not just a predator," he explained. "It sees itself as a force of cosmic order. To it, consciousness is a disease that spreads chaos throughout the universe. It believes it is healing the cosmos by consuming thinking beings." Dr. Yun Young, monitoring from the ship, found this revelation terrifying. "So it's not evil in the way we understand evil. It genuinely believes it's doing good. The most dangerous enemies always do," Captain Tae-hyun observed grimly. The rescue team fought running battles through the crystalline ruins as the Silence began to manifest physically. Dark tentacles of energy phased through walls and floors, reaching for the humans with hungry intent. But something strange happened when they made contact. "Sir," Corporal Kim reported over the radio, "these tentacle things touched me and they just recoiled, like I burned them." "Same here," Sergeant Yoon added. "It's like they can't figure out how to grab onto us." Subin was analyzing their brain patterns in real time. "The Silence is trying to consume your consciousness, but it can't establish a stable connection. Your thoughts are too chaotic, too unpredictable. It's like trying to grab water with your bare hands." They found 2 more survivor shelters, each with a handful of Thylos refugees clinging to life. But with each rescue, the Silence adapted. It began learning to anticipate human thought patterns, to predict their chaotic mental movements. "It's getting better at reading us," Subin warned. "The protection won't last forever." During the 3rd rescue, young Zilneth insisted on joining the mission despite Veltar's protests. "I am the only one whose thoughts bridge both species," the young Thylos argued. "You need me to communicate with the deep shelters." Zilneth proved invaluable, able to speak directly to Thylos survivors whose minds had been partially consumed. But something else happened as they worked together. The young alien's thoughts were becoming more human-like, more chaotic. And where Zilneth's hybrid consciousness touched the silence, something unprecedented occurred. It hesitated. For the first time in eons, the silence encountered something it couldn't immediately categorize. Zilneth's mind was part ordered Thylos, logic part chaotic human dream. It was a contradiction that the silence couldn't resolve. "Captain," Hyunwoo called from his analysis station, "I'm detecting something strange. The signal patterns from the silence are changing. It's almost like it's confused." Confused by what? By Zilneth. The young Thylos is starting to think like a human, but still has the underlying Thylos neural structure. To the silence, it must be like looking at an impossible equation. Commander Woo Jin led the final push to evacuate the last known shelter. They found only one survivor, an ancient Thylos named Corwin who had been the keeper of their civilization's memories. But this Thylos was different. Its thoughts had been partially consumed but not destroyed, leaving behind a fragmented consciousness that jumped between clarity and chaos. "The signal," Corwin whispered to them. "The distress signal you received. It was not sent by us." "What?" Woo Jin stopped moving. "We sent many signals, yes, calling for help from other species. But the signal that reached your world, that was sent by the silence itself." Woo Jin felt ice form in his stomach. "Why would it send out distress signals?" "As bait," Corwin said simply. 47 species answered that call. 47 species were consumed. You are the 48th to answer. But we survived the approach. Yes. Corwin's broken thoughts flickered with something that might have been hope. You survived because you answered by accident. Your primitive technology was never meant to detect the signal. But you did. And that accident may be the key to everything. As they evacuated the last survivors, the silence pressed closer, learning more about human consciousness with each encounter. It was beginning to adapt, beginning to understand how to consume chaotic thoughts. Time was running out. The protection that human chaos provided wouldn't last much longer, but they had learned something crucial. The silence could be confused, could be made to hesitate, and confusion was something humans understood very well. The real battle was about to begin, and for the first time in eons, the silence was not certain of victory. Back aboard the Determination, the rescued Thylos survivors filled the medical bay. Dr. Yoon Young worked frantically to treat beings whose very consciousness was being consumed, while ancient Mordin shared everything his people knew about their enemy. "The silence exists in multiple dimensions," Mordin explained to the gathered humans. "Your physical weapons pass through it because it phases between realities at will. But there is something else. It cannot fully manifest in our dimension, while it is confused." Captain Taehyun leaned forward. "Confused how?" "When it encounters consciousness, it cannot immediately categorize and consume. Your chaotic human thoughts buy time, but the silence adapts quickly. However, young Zilneth represents something new. A hybrid consciousness that contradicts its basic understanding of how minds work." Hyunwoo had been monitoring the silence's behavior patterns since the rescue mission. "Captain, look at these readings. Every time Zilneth interacted with it, the silence's signal patterns became erratic. It's like watching a computer crash. When it encounters data, it can't process." Dr. Subin had been developing her theory about human consciousness as a weapon. What if we could amplify that effect? What if we could create so much cognitive chaos that the silence couldn't function at all? "How?" asked Sojin. "By turning the entire ship into a psychic amplifier. I've been studying the Thylos mental linking technology. Instead of creating unity like they did, we could create organized chaos. 200 human minds all thinking different thoughts simultaneously, but broadcast as a single overwhelming signal." Chief Engineer Ji-hoon looked up from the Thylos equipment he was modifying. The mental linking systems were designed for ordered thoughts. Pumping chaotic human consciousness through them might overload everything. Or it might create something unprecedented, Subin countered. The Thylos achieved perfect mental harmony and became perfect prey. What if we achieve perfect mental discord and become the perfect predator? Lieutenant Dongmin was skeptical. With respect, ma'am, that sounds extremely dangerous. What if linking our minds damages us permanently? What if not doing it dooms Earth? Captain Taehyun said quietly. The silence is following us home. If we can't stop it here, humanity has maybe 6 months before it reaches our solar system. Veltar, who had been listening from the medical bed, spoke up weakly. Your plan has never been attempted. The risks are incalculable. Good, Taehyun replied. The silence has conquered 47 civilizations by knowing exactly what to expect. Let's give it something it's never seen before. They worked through the night preparing for something that had never been tried in the history of sapient life. Ji-hoon modified the Thylos mental linking technology, but instead of creating harmony, he designed it to amplify discord. So-jin established communication links that would broadcast human thoughts directly at the silence. Subin prepared psychological monitors to track the mental state of every crew member. Dr. Yoon Young made a disturbing discovery during her examinations of the rescued Thylos. Captain, the survivors are changing. Extended exposure to human consciousness is making their thought patterns more chaotic. Look at young Zil-Neth especially. The young Thylos had spent the most time around humans, and its crystalline form now flickered with rapid color changes that mirrored the chaotic nature of human thought. When it spoke, its words jumped between topics like a human conversation. Is that bad? Taehyun asked. I don't know, Yoon Young admitted. But it's unprecedented. Zil-Neth is becoming something that has never existed before. A being with both ordered Thylos logic and chaotic human intuition. Zil-Neth itself seemed fascinated by the changes. Human thoughts are like music with no pattern, it said to Hyunwoo. Confusing, but beautiful? Is that the word? My people eliminated such randomness from our minds, but now I understand what we lost. What did you lose? Hyunwoo asked. Surprise. Wonder. The joy of not knowing what thought comes next. This gave Subin a new idea. What if the key isn't just chaos, but the emotional component of chaos? Humans don't just think randomly. We feel randomly too. Joy, fear, love, anger, all mixed together in impossible combinations. She began modifying her plan. Instead of just linking their thoughts, they would link their emotions too. 200 humans feeling everything at once, love and hate, hope and despair, courage and terror, all broadcast directly into the silence's consciousness. You want to give it human emotions? Dr. Yoon Young asked, horrified and fascinated at the same time. I want to give it the full human experience, Subin said. Let it feel what it's like to be afraid and brave at the same time, to love something you know you might lose, to hope for things that might be impossible. As they prepared for the attempt, the silence pressed closer to the ship. It had been studying them during the rescue mission, learning to read human thoughts more effectively. Dark tendrils of energy began penetrating their shields, reaching for the minds inside. It's adapting faster than expected, So-jin reported. We have maybe an hour before it figures out how to consume human consciousness. Then we do this now, Taehyun decided. All hands to positions. Initiate mental linking procedures. The effect was immediate and overwhelming, as 200 human minds, connected through the modified Thylos technology, their thoughts exploded outward in a symphony of beautiful chaos. Every crew member experienced a moment of connection with every other crew member, their fears, hopes, dreams, and memories all mixing together. Engineer Kim was simultaneously solving a warp drive problem, missing his wife, humming an old song, and wondering what his daughter was doing in school. Communications Officer Park was translating alien languages while composing poetry and planning her next vacation. Medical Officer Lee was analyzing biological data while worrying about her mother's health and laughing at a joke someone had told her years ago. All of this, the technical thoughts, the emotional thoughts, the random thoughts, the important thoughts, the silly thoughts, burst outward from the ship like a psychic shockwave. The silence recoiled as if burned. It's working, So-jin shouted. The silence is retreating. It can't process what we're broadcasting. But the effect was more than just repelling their enemy. The chaotic human broadcast was changing the space around them, Reality itself began to flicker and shift as the silence tried desperately to understand what it was experiencing. For eons, the silence had consumed ordered consciousness, minds that thought in predictable patterns. But human consciousness was like trying to drink the ocean during a hurricane. Every time it grasped one thought, 17 others pulled it in different directions. Even worse, the emotions were completely alien to it. The silence understood hunger, the drive to consume and create order, but love, hope, the strange human ability to believe in impossible things. These concepts made no sense to a being designed to eliminate chaos. "Captain," Hyunwoo called out, his voice strange from the mental linking. "I'm detecting changes in the silence itself. It's not just retreating, it's learning." Through the ship's sensors, they could see the silence writhing in space, its dark form flickering between dimensions more rapidly than before. Instead of the slow, purposeful movement they had seen before, it now moved erratically, almost frantically. Young Zilneth, whose hybrid consciousness was part of the mental link, made a startling observation. "It's trying to think like us," the young Thylos said with wonder. "The silence is attempting to process chaotic thoughts, but it doesn't know how." Dr. Subin realized what was happening. "We're not just confusing it, we're changing it. By forcing it to experience human consciousness, we're teaching it to think chaotically." "Is that good or bad?" Taehyun asked. "I have no idea," Subin admitted. "But it's something that's never happened before in the history of the universe." The mental link amplified not just their thoughts, but their determination. 200 humans, thinking as individuals but united in purpose, focused their chaotic consciousness on a single goal, not destroying the silence, but transforming it. For the first time in eons, the silence experienced doubt, uncertainty, the terrifying and wonderful feeling of not knowing what came next, and deep in its ancient consciousness, something that might have been curiosity began to stir. The final confrontation began not with weapons but with an impossible choice. As the silence writhed in confusion around the determination, Captain Taehyun realized that running away would solve nothing. The entity would eventually adapt to human chaos, just as it had adapted to every other form of consciousness it had encountered. "We have to go inside it," Taehyun announced to his shocked crew. "Sir?" Lieutenant Dongmin's voice cracked through the mental link they all shared. "Inside the silence itself? It's the only way. We can't defeat it from out here, but maybe we can change it from within." Dr. Subin understood first. "You want to teach it to be human. I want to give it what it's never had, a choice. For eons, it's consumed ordered consciousness because that's all it knew existed. But now it's tasting chaos for the first time. We need to show it that chaos isn't something to be eliminated. It's something to be celebrated." Veltar's crystalline form flickered with terror. No species has ever voluntarily entered the silence and survived. It is not a place, it is a state of non-being. "Then we'll be the first," Taehyun said simply. "Volunteers only. No one has to come." Dr. Yoon Young stepped forward. "I'll go. If we're going to understand what the silence truly is, we need a biologist." Chief Engineer Ji-hoon nodded. "Someone needs to figure out how its consciousness is structured. Count me in." Hyunwoo joined them. "If we're going to communicate with something this ancient, we'll need a linguist." Young Zilneth surprised everyone by volunteering. "My thoughts are part human now, part Thylos. I can bridge the gap between order and chaos." In the end, 12 volunteers entered the specially modified shuttlecraft that Ji-hoon had equipped. With every piece of Thylos consciousness protection technology they could adapt. As they approached the silence, reality itself began to break down around them. The boundary between the silence and normal space wasn't like crossing a wall. It was like falling through a mirror into a place where thoughts became solid and memories had weight. The moment they entered, they found themselves in a vast space that seemed to stretch infinitely in all directions. But they weren't alone. "By all the stars," Dr. Yoon Young whispered. Surrounding them were the preserved consciousnesses of 47 extinct civilizations. The Zephyrians floated like crystalline ghosts, their hive mind still intact but frozen in time. The crystalline collective hung in perfect geometric formations, their shared thoughts trapped in eternal loops. Dozens of other species, all perfectly ordered, all perfectly dead. It didn't destroy them, Hyunwoo realized. It preserved them. At the center of this vast museum of consciousness was the silence itself, not the dark, writhing entity they had seen from outside, but something far more complex. It was ancient beyond measure, and they could feel its confusion as it tried to process their chaotic human thoughts. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Why do you resist order?" it asked. "Why do you cling to chaos, when harmony is so much more efficient?" Captain Taehyun stepped forward, though forward had no meaning in this place. "Because chaos is what makes life worth living." "Life?" The silence seemed genuinely puzzled. "I preserve life. Look around you. 47 civilizations, all kept in perfect order for eternity." "This isn't life," Dr. Yoon said, looking at the frozen consciousnesses around them. "This is a museum. Life means change, growth, the possibility of failure." "Failure is inefficient," the silence replied. "Order eliminates waste, eliminates suffering, eliminates uncertainty. It also eliminates joy," Zilneth said, its hybrid consciousness flickering between dimensions. "I was raised in perfect Thylos order. We had no suffering, but we also had no surprise, no wonder, no love." "Love." The silence repeated the word as if trying to understand its meaning. "An inefficient chemical reaction that serves no logical purpose." Ji-hoon laughed, actually laughed in the face of a cosmic horror. "You're right. It serves no logical purpose. That's what makes it beautiful." Through their mental link, the human volunteers began sharing their memories with the silence. Not just their thoughts, but their experiences. Ji-hoon showed it the joy of solving an impossible engineering problem. Dr. Yoon shared the wonder of discovering a new form of life. Hyunwoo offered the satisfaction of helping someone understand a difficult concept, but they also shared the painful memories. Taehyun showed it the grief of losing his parents, the fear of making a wrong decision that could cost lives. The humans held nothing back. They gave the silence the full spectrum of consciousness, the beautiful and the terrible together. The effect was immediate and shocking. For the first time in its existence, the silence experienced doubt. "These thoughts are contradictory," it said, its voice less certain than before. "You simultaneously fear death and risk your lives for others. You love beings you know you will lose. You hope for things that logic says are impossible." "That's what makes us human," Taehyun said. "We're walking contradictions and we're proud of it." Young Zilneth moved deeper into the silence's consciousness, its hybrid nature allowing it to serve as a bridge between order and chaos. "You don't have to choose between them," Zilneth said. "Order and chaos can exist together. They can create something new." To demonstrate, Zilneth began sharing its own transformation, how exposure to human consciousness had changed it from a perfectly ordered Thylos into something unprecedented. Its thoughts now danced between logic and intuition, between certainty and wonder. The silence studied this hybrid consciousness with something that might have been fascination. "This is new," it admitted. "In all my eons of existence, I have never encountered consciousness that was both ordered and chaotic simultaneously. Because you kept consuming anything that wasn't perfectly ordered," Dr. Yoon pointed out. "You never gave yourself the chance to learn from chaos." Slowly, carefully, the silence began to experiment. It allowed some of its perfectly preserved civilizations to experience small amounts of chaos, random thoughts, uncertain outcomes, the possibility of change. The results were immediate and miraculous. The frozen Zephyrian hive mind began to sing, not the perfect harmony they had always known, but a complex music full of individual voices. The crystalline collective's geometric perfection began to shift and flow, creating new patterns that had never existed before. They're alive again, Hyunwoo whispered in amazement. More alive than they ever were. The silence said, and for the first time its voice held something like wonder. This chaos creates possibilities I never imagined. But the transformation went both ways. As the silence learned to embrace chaos, the humans found their own thoughts becoming more organized, more purposeful. The mental link they shared allowed them to think as individuals while still working toward common goals. We're changing too, Captain Taehyun realized, learning from each other. The silence began to release its grip on the civilizations it had consumed, but they emerged transformed. The Thylos returned with new capacity for creative disorder. The Zephyrians discovered the joy of disagreement. Species that had achieved perfect unity learned to celebrate individual differences. But the most profound change was in the silence itself. The ancient entity that had spent eons eliminating chaos began to understand that chaos and order were not enemies. They were dance partners. Together they created complexity, beauty, and life itself. I have been incomplete, the silence admitted. I sought to create perfect order, but perfection is static. Life requires the dynamic tension between order and chaos. As the transformation spread throughout the silence's consciousness, something unprecedented happened. The entity began to laugh, a sound like stars being born and galaxies spinning in their courses. It was the laughter of a being discovering joy for the first time. Across the galaxy, the changes rippled outward. Worlds that had been consumed began to bloom with new life. Civilizations thought lost forever emerged from their crystalline prisons, changed but alive. The silence, no longer silent, began to sing, a cosmic symphony that celebrated both order and chaos, logic and love, certainty and surprise. When the human volunteers finally returned to the determination, they found their crew changed as well. The mental link had shown everyone what it meant to think as both individuals and as a collective. They were still chaotically, beautifully human, but they had also learned the value of working in harmony. Veltar approached Captain Taehyun with something that might have been tears glittering in its crystalline eyes. You saved not just my people, but all people. How can we ever thank you? Taehyun smiled. You already have. You asked for help, and we listened. But why? Veltar asked. Your species risked everything for strangers you had never met. Because someone was calling for help, Taehyun said simply, and we happened to be listening. The determination began its journey home, but it was no longer alone. Ships from dozens of resurrected civilizations accompanied them, all eager to learn more about the chaotic, contradictory, wonderfully illogical humans who had taught the universe to embrace its beautiful disorder. Behind them, the silence, now calling itself the symphony, continued its work throughout the galaxy. But instead of consuming consciousness, it helped civilizations find the balance between order and chaos, between logic and love, between certainty and the thrilling.